Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. Today I'm joined by Ross McCurdy, who is running for Lieutenant Governor of Rhode Island as an independent. Ross, how are you today?
Doing very well, and thank you very much for having me on your show, Ray.
Absolutely, and thank you for giving me your time for this interview. I can only imagine how busy things are with the schedule with just 1 week to go until voting time. Currently, for those watching, we're filming this on Tuesday, November 1st. My first question, it's a bit of a general one. Why do you want to be Rhode Island's Lieutenant Governor?
25 years ago, I became a teacher to help build a better future. And that's why I'm running for Lieutenant Governor now, for the same reason, to help build a better future. And let me give you a little bit of my background. Right after high school, I joined the military. I served 6 years in the Air Force, where I worked as a Russian linguist. That was an interesting time. That was back in the 80s when the Soviet Union was called the Evil Empire by Ronald Reagan. And so that was an intelligence kind of job. From there, I had a pretty major change after I got out of the military. I decided to pursue music. And that was a good time for many years. I met a lot of good people and learned a lot doing that. But then it was time to grow up and get more serious. That led me to Rhode Island College, where I worked hard, worked my way through college. I met some excellent professors there, like Dr. Matsumoto, who convinced me to become a biology major. Graduated with a degree in biology with highest honors. I also got a master's degree, and Rhode Island College also gave me an honorary doctorate, which was a huge honor to me. After college, I became a teacher at Pontiac High School, where I started teaching chemistry and alternative energy. I'm in my 25th year right now. It's been really exciting. And my students and I have had the good fortune to be able to do a lot of very interesting and innovative renewable energy projects.
Congratulations on 25 years and thank you for your service. My next question, this is your second time running for the office of Lieutenant Governor. You ran before in 2018. What are some key differences you see between this bid compared to your 2018 one?
You know, a lot of the stuff is the same. Some of the biggest differences in 2018, there were 5 people on the ballot for lieutenant governor. There were 2 independents, including myself, and there was a moderate along with a Republican and a Democrat. This year, there's only 3 of us on the ballot. So Democrat, Republican, myself as an independent. 2018, things seem to be a little bit friendlier among the political candidates. This year, there's a lot of vitriol flying back and forth, and it's pretty heated. You're probably seeing that yourself. I've got a little bit more experience now that I ran before, things like getting nomination signatures. As lieutenant governor, I had to get 500 signatures that count, which means you got to get about 800, and that way you'll get at least 600 that count. You don't want to fall short on that. I collected most of the signatures myself, and from experience, I was able to do that. Interestingly, a lot of the other candidates with major parties, they don't collect all their own signatures. Some candidates even pay to have signatures collected for them. I'm proud to say I collected my own signatures. But those are some of the big differences, and fewer people running this year, especially in the slot of lieutenant governor, and just much more heated with the debates.
Looking at the office itself, it has a limited number of responsibilities, but that doesn't stop the office holder from using it as a platform to advocate for issues they're passionate about. For example, the current Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos focuses on housing. Her predecessor, then Lieutenant Governor McKee, focused on charter schools and small businesses. And then his predecessor, Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Roberts, focused on healthcare. Where would your main areas of focus be if elected?
My 4 big areas of focus are going to be on education, energy, particularly renewable energy, the environment, and the economy. Those are things that are really important to all of us as Rhode Islanders. And I have experience in all those things. Financial responsibility is a huge thing for me. I get frustrated when I see taxpayer dollars being spent on things that don't really seem to be a good idea. Going back about 4 years ago, it was a proposed Burrillville power plant where they're going to tear up 200 acres of pristine Northwest Rhode Island forest and put in a fossil fuel burning power plant that was going to continue to burn fossil fuels for 30 years. That was going to be mostly a natural gas power plant. Right now, natural gas has become expensive, which is why our electric bills are set. Actually, they went up somewhere between 43 to 47% as of October 1st. So that's really high. So that frustrated me. I spoke out against that, and I was really glad to see that that project was killed. So that was gone. Right now, the proposed soccer stadium, Tidewater in Pawtucket, that's $60 million of taxpayer money being used for a private venture for uh, basically a small time semi-pro soccer stadium. And I think the money could be spent in far better areas. Going back about 10 or so years ago, it was tens of millions of dollars that the taxpayers were on the hook for 38 studios, and ended up going bankrupt. I think the government, there's certain areas that they need to focus on, but things like entertainment, video games, it just has not worked out.
Speaking of one of those topics you had mentioned, which is renewable energy, you have quite the expertise on this topic, being a science teacher yourself. So, say you're elected and the governor that you're working with asks you for your expertise on this topic. What ways do you recommend to achieving the goal of being 100% renewable?
There are four areas of renewable energy that we really need to focus on. These are all proven technologies: solar, wind, geothermal, and hydroelectric. With those four areas combined with battery storage technology, that's huge. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. However, the water generally always flows because gravity works. And geothermal, as long as you can dig a hole in the ground, you can get geothermal energy. So that's going to work. But having battery storage for solar and wind, I think is huge. So this is a company in Massachusetts called Form Energy, and they're working with 50-year-old technology, iron air batteries. They're 10% the cost of lithium ion batteries, but they work well. They can store for 4 days, so less expensive. They're a little bit less efficient, about 40%, but the math seems to work out. That's a really exciting technology. Being able to produce electricity renewably and being able to store it so it's available when needed could help reduce peak power plant demands when everybody gets home and starts cranking on their stoves and their air conditioner. So that's something really important. And some people view renewable energy as kind of to the left. I view it as squarely right in the middle, if not conservative, because this is the only way that we're going to be able to get out of these wild fluctuations in the price of gas. Right now, Europe is set to get hammered this winter because of what's going on in the Ukraine. The Europeans relied on Russian natural gas, Russian oil, and now they don't have that anymore. That's a huge problem. We need energy security. We need to rely on our own sources of energy. And for the medium and long term, that's the direction we need to head. Whether you're a liberal or a conservative, it's just the writing on the wall. The good news is we're slowly getting there. And I'm so proud that Rhode Island has the first offshore wind turbines in the United States and all of the Americas. The East Coast water area, that has been called the Saudi Arabia of wind. Strong wind, water's not too deep, close to major metropolitan areas. We need to put up a lot more wind turbines there and harvest the wind. The sun shines free, the wind blows free. Once you build these things, there shouldn't be any price fluctuations. So I'm a huge advocate of renewable energy.
How do you feel about nuclear energy?
Nuclear energy can keep the lights on, it can produce huge amounts of power, but there's a terrible downside to it. We don't know what to do with the nuclear waste. They're expensive, and when it goes bad, it goes really bad. Fukushima meltdown, Chernobyl, a Russian disaster, where the whole city of Pripyat, the size of Providence, there are 100,000 people living there. That city has had to be abandoned. There are safer ways to make nuclear reactors. There's new modular reactor technology that's basically, so they say, foolproof, but we still don't know what to do with the nuclear waste. And that stuff stays deadly poisonous for tens of thousands of years, 100,000 years. I think we need to focus on the renewables and the battery storage, and nuclear only as an absolutely last resort.
I was also looking at other parts of your campaign platform on your website. You also favor campaign finance reform, which this topic goes under the radar quite often, considering all dark money that gets poured into these races. What reforms would you advocate for if elected for campaign finance?
Bob Healy with a Cool Moose party going back some years ago. And sadly, he died. He's an inspiration for a lot of people. And he advocated that for campaign finance, whatever office it was, the person running for it should be limited to the amount of campaign spending to half of what the office earned in a year. I'm more generous than that. I think if it's equal to what the office earns in a year, I believe the lieutenant governor position is about 122,000. Each candidate running for that should be limited to spending 122,000. So, for example, the governor, what's that, about 160 something thousand dollars. Right now, people are spending millions on the governor office, a job that pays 160, $170,000. Right now, the race between Fung and Seth Magaziner is, I believe that's up to $8 million. And we need to take the money as much as we sensibly can out of the politics. I don't trust many of the big establishment parties there. You don't know where the money is coming. And when you take $1 million in political contributions, you probably owe $1 million worth of favors. So it's a source of frustration for me. Also, one of the things I like to see, they have matching funds in Rhode Island, but I believe you have to get somewhere around $75,000 in funds before they will match them. So if you're loaded, you can get more money. It's one of the things that really seems to be wrong with this country that, and then again, I mean, it's just been going on forever. It takes money to make money kind of thing, but sometimes it really favors the rich and the wealthy. There was a WPRO radio debate between Sabina Matos and Aaron Gukian, and I wasn't invited. I'm on the ballot. I said, hey, how about an invitation? They said I did not meet the criteria. I asked what the criteria were, and they said, talk to the program director, but he left for the day, call him tomorrow. And so I never did call him, but the biggest thing, it's got to be money. Otherwise, why would they shut out a person who's on the ballot, someone who has over 24 years in public education, someone who's a military veteran? I'd like to think I can speak well, intelligent, articulate. That's the only thing. So money, we need to get the money out of politics. We also need more than two viable parties. There's 330 million people in the United States. We can boil that down to two polarized parties that just seem to fan the fuel or fan the fire of dissent between them. And they're not coming closer together. They're getting farther apart. We need a half dozen political parties. They have a lot of political parties in Europe, and we need more political parties here. We also need things like ranked choice voting. That can change things up a little bit. The established political parties, they don't want other parties because that will weaken them. But that's what we need as Americans. So I really stand for choice. If I wasn't running, there'd be one Democrat and one Republican running for office. I really believe in choice among voters. We've all seen elections where it comes down to two people and we say, is this the best that America can produce? I believe in choice and give the voters a choice of who to vote for.
This might be a bit of a curveball, but since you mentioned third parties in Rhode Island, in order for a third party like the Libertarian or Moderate, in order to become an established, recognized party, they have to get 5% for a statewide candidate or a presidential candidate. How do you feel about that? Is that, what's the word I'm looking for, ridiculous?
Statewide, getting 5%, that's a pretty big challenge. It's not impossible, but it seems that there's barriers put in place to keep third parties out, to keep independents, to keep libertarians out. And the system very often just seems to be rigged. And I get emails from both sides, like begging for money. And some of these, you look it up, the net worth of some of these politicians is $15 million. And I'm getting an email, oh, please support this candidate. Can you send $10 or something like that? I haven't raised a whole lot of money. Times are tough. We're facing double-digit inflation, almost 50% increase in energy costs, and it's looking to be worse for the winter with home heating oil and things like that. I just don't have the heart to beg for money all that hard under these challenging times. So I just try to do what I can with what I have and try to get the word out that there's another choice for people.
And you were talking about the economy a bit, which that's also another big topic. On your website, you favor trickle-up economics. which is the opposite of trickle down economics, which was the failed policy that then President Reagan tried to implement, where they cut the taxes for the rich and hope that it would trickle down. Um, trickle up is interesting topic that I believe Andrew Yang brought up with the idea of universal basic income. What would your idea of trickle up economics look like?
Yeah, back in the 80s with the Reaganomics and like giving tax breaks to rich people and hope it comes trickling down to us regular people like, oh, thank you. Let me just try to grab some of these crumbs that may or may not come down to me. That is absolute garbage. The very rich, they're already rich. They don't need any tax breaks. I don't want to gouge anybody. I'm not faulting people. Hey, you're rich. Maybe you worked hard to get that way. Congratulations. It's America. Go for it. But everybody needs to pay their fair share. Everybody. If they're going to give tax breaks, they need to give them to the working class. And so we'll do the same thing that the very rich will. We're either going to spend it or invest it, and it'll help improve our lives. And maybe, just maybe, it'll trickle up. But if it doesn't, who cares? Because the very rich are already very rich. I know past presidents have given tax cuts to the top 1%. That's ridiculous. It's already top 1%. Sometimes there's so much frustration when we see things like this happen, and people justify them, these voodoo economics that just don't make any sense, and then they justify it. A good example of just like really bad economic policy recently happened in England with Liz Truss, the prime minister, for all of 6 weeks. It was such garbage. Give tax breaks to the very rich, tax breaks to corporations, and then to fill the gap of the money they need, they were borrowing money. It was insanity. And thank goodness that the market reacted to that, slammed the British pound so it became almost parity with the dollar for the first time in history. And she ended up out in 6 weeks. And that's really the way when people have garbage policies, they need to be ousted as fast as possible before they can adversely affect things. We've got a delicate economy, and when people screw up, it hurts. Especially it hurts working class people, middle class people, poor people. It's not hurting the rich. They're already rich. They have a buffer zone. But for people just getting by, and I know I'm certainly not rich. I'm a teacher. My wife's a teacher. You know, I'm raising 4 kids. One of them's in college now. It's challenging. Now we're looking at every single bill going up. So I would like to see real, just common sense with taxes, everyone paying their fair share. And while I'm talking about some of this stuff, you've probably heard talk about minimum wage going up to $15 an hour. There's a lot of discussion about that. And I'm okay with that. That seems to be fine. One of the things that people aren't looking at all, CEO pay in this country is absolutely insane. I looked at Target. We're going to talk about small business probably a little bit later. The CEO of Target is making $20 million a year. 20 million. What happens if you pay them 10 million? They don't go to work, they quit their job or stamp their feet. And as far as energy stuff goes, we're looking at over 40% increase in electricity. For some reason, I don't know this reason, National Grid was running the electricity in Rhode Island, but they sold out to Rhode Island Energy. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rhode Island Energy, but Rhode Island Energy isn't based in Rhode Island. It's Pennsylvania Power and Light. Pennsylvania Power and Light CEO got paid $9 million. $9 million. The National Grid CEO was getting paid about $6 or $7 million. But while the electric rates are going up, he got $1 million raise. How do they justify this? I call that the artificial concentration of wealth, where these CEOs are just taking huge amounts of pay. And I'm not a socialist. By no means am I a communist, but that is absolute ridiculous greed that's out of control. When CEOs are making 1,500 times more than the wage of the average employee, something needs to be done about that. And sure, maybe they do a good job. Okay, get a few $1 million. I'm not opposed to people getting paid well, but people should be getting paid more than 500 times what the average worker is doing. I just don't see how they justify that.
Do you see UBI having a place in this conversation?
Universal basic income. I'm not sure where I stand on that. And that's basically where everybody gets every citizen gets a certain amount of money every month. I just have this feeling of people just like living on universal basic income and just getting by and not reaching out for anything more. I could see that as being like a serious social drain in some ways. Just people need some incentive to go to work. I like people going to work. Very often, maybe I complain about getting up early in the morning, but I like to go to work. I like to have a purpose. Before we even talked about universal basic income, we need to address healthcare. And that is a really hard issue. People have tried to get healthcare, universal healthcare for citizens in the United States. And it's going to take more people than just me to have the answer. But one of the things I know is that we're about the only first world country on the planet that doesn't have healthcare for all its citizens. However, when I was in the military, I lived in England for 3 years. They have socialized medicine, but it's not a free ride. It's not a free lunch. People there, and pretty much throughout all of Europe, they're paying double for gas, and they're paying twice as much to 3 times as much in taxes. There's a reason the Beatles sang a song called Taxman back in the 60s, because in England, they were taxing everything. So if we want universal health care, we have to be willing as a nation to pay for it. Everybody needs to pay their fair share. And I think that's something we need to work towards.
Moving on to the council assignments that the lieutenant governor has, this has been quite the topic amongst Republican Aaron Gukian and Lieutenant Governor, the Democrat Sabina Matos, where he's called her out on not showing up for a majority of these meetings. When you go on that Secretary of State website, a lot of them, they didn't meet quorum those meetings, so they just never happened. And this is for councils like the Long-Term Care Coordinated Council, which is critical because it focuses on helping senior citizens, and Rhode Island is a majority senior citizen state. This is a bit of a two-parter, so I'll give you time to elaborate. How do you feel about that criticism, and do you consider it to be a valid critique?
I'm not so sure it's a valid critique. It's important to go to meetings when they happen. There's an expression: you're either at the table or on the table, and being on the table isn't good. So you want to go to the meetings. However, the lieutenant governor job, I'm sure they have a lot to do, and they have a lot of places to be, and sometimes they have conflicting assignments. So someone who's never been lieutenant governor, slamming someone who's been lieutenant governor for 17 months and seemed to do a pretty good job overall, I didn't like that. I listened to that on the WPRO radio show that I was not invited to. And yeah, it was just, it's that kind of like mean-spirited politics that I don't really like seeing. I do think it's important to go to the meetings, but I don't know the whole story because I'm not sitting in that seat. And very often there might be a meeting, but there might be a crisis somewhere else, and you need to prioritize. I think that's hugely important. Now, if I were to be elected to become lieutenant governor, I would do my best to be at meetings. And even more important than being at meetings, I've been teaching for years. I've gone to meetings. I've been parts of organizations. And it takes about 8 months to figure out that the purpose of the meetings is to have meetings. And you realize like a year later, wow, we got virtually nothing done. So I would set out goals and try to actually get things done. So with these 3 or 4 committees, I would go to the meetings, I would have goals and try to make something better. Because just sitting at a table for an hour or 2 and shuffling paperwork around without getting anything done, that's so painful to me. I like getting things done. I mean, I'm a teacher. I know how to shuffle paperwork, but I also know how to get things done. My renewable energy projects took years of work, but I learned from them. And if it was easy, I wouldn't do it. I like taking on big challenges. And if I have to go to meetings, if that's a part of it, you go to meetings, but with a focus of getting stuff done and getting good stuff done.
Speaking of getting stuff done and big challenges, helping out the state's small business community is one of those big challenges right now because the economy has been wrecked by COVID, which trickled down and hurt the small businesses even more. What would you do to ensure small businesses thrive as lieutenant governor?
Yeah, I want to say I like small businesses. Whenever I can, I shop at small businesses. I worked at a small business. That's how I got through college, through Rhode Island College. As I was working, I was selling guitars and other musical stuff. And that was the first job I loved. And it was a great experience. I met people from all walks of life. And sadly, that music store, it's not there anymore. That small business is gone because big box stores moved in And the classic thing, they have low prices for about a year or two, just long enough to drive the competition out of business. And then all of a sudden, when the competition is gone, they raise their prices back up. And the sad part is sometimes these big box stores go out of business. Or, and wait, let me rephrase that. They don't go out of business, they just go bankrupt. They go bankrupt, then they borrow more money and then keep the wheels turning. The small businesses aren't able to do that. They can't go, hey, I'm going to go bankrupt, but I'm just going to start again. It's a lot harder for that. But to help small business thrive, I got a whole list of things that I wrote down on one of
Yeah,
these.
go ahead, list them
papers.
all. I appreciate you coming with the whole list. I really appreciate when candidates do this.
Yeah, but the things that people are complaining about, regulations, licenses, permitting, things that are just making it hard for small business, having to talk to 8 agencies when they should just be talking to one. I was just talking with some small business owners last night, during Halloween, hanging out with some kids and with some parents, and like ask them, what are your challenges? And those are the same things that come up. Also, making sure that there's fair tax structure for the small businesses. Small businesses account for the most business in Rhode Island, and we have to help them. And if we're giving an unfair playing field to big box stores with tax breaks and incentives and things just to move in, I don't agree with that. I don't want everything to be homogenized. So one part of America or one part of Rhode Island looks the same as everywhere else because it's just loaded with big box stores with overpaid CEOs when this should be going to hardworking, middle class Americans putting food on the table for their families and kids and trying to get them dressed, get to school, get to college, and just earn a good living and earn a life. That's where I stand on small business. And one of the things I would really like to do, we've got the Small Business Alliance, and work with them, talk to people in small businesses and find out what are your biggest challenges and how can we fix those? How can we streamline it? How can we make it a better environment? And that's a perfect opportunity. We've got these meetings, we've got people at the table, invite people who are in business and get it worked on by people who know the challenges best, the small business owners.
Moving on to some quick non-political topics. I have things before we wrap things up. You're a Rick grad. You attended Rhode Island College. We talked about it a bit through some of the questions. But to formally ask you about it, what was your time like as a Rick student?
It was challenging, but it was awesome. And that was a second chance for me. I was an older student. I, wasn't really sure quite where I was going. People helped me. The professors were all excellent. And I was working my way through college. So you know how it is. You're working full time. You're going to school full time and you're just praying that it can fit and work out. And somehow it did. I studied hard. My professors were there to help me. And many of the professors are still there teaching kids. And I learned so much. I'm proud to say I graduated with highest honors while I was there. And it changed my life. All my classmates that I went to Rhode Island College with, they got into the fields they were looking to get into, whether it was nursing, doctor, physical therapy, teaching, and all of them are doing well. I'm a huge advocate for Rhode Island College. And one of the things I want to see, right now, CCRI is free. And by the way, my wife went to CCRI, then went to URI, and now she's teaching and it worked for her. But CCRI, first 2 years are free. I'd like to see that extended where 2 years at Rhode Island College, and also I like an option for 2 years at URI to be free. At the very least, take the cost of what CCRI would be for 2 years, and then apply that to Rhode Island College or URI. For students who want to go right into a 4-year school, who meet the criteria, I think CCRI's program is great. I just want to give our high school students, I want to give everybody a choice of where they want to go for our state schools. And I really believe in our state schools. They're the best deal in education, and they help students get to where they need to be.
It's very true. Rhode Island College is honestly a hidden gem. And I mean, I probably talk about this every time I talk to a Rick grad on the show, and not to sound like a broken record for those watching, but it really is an underrated school and it needs a lot more resources. And I'm going to continue to say that. I mean, I attend there, so I guess I'm a little biased, but it is very true what Ross is saying. It's an amazing school, and I'm glad that it ended up working out and that you're in a profession that you want to be in, because Rick is known for a lot of great things. We have a lot of talented liberal arts students, a great teaching program, great nursing program. When I first started there, I found out all the big journalists locally here in Rhode Island attended Rick, like Mike Montecavo, like John DePietro, just plenty of them. There's a producer at PRO who was most recently working at the newspaper on that right now, the anchor. I'm going off on a tangent, but
That's okay.
my final question is also a non-political topic. It's tradition here on the show to ask it. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
First thing that comes to mind, beaches, Newport mansions and the cliff walk. The east side of Providence is beautiful. And we're kind of spoiled here. Like Benefit Street, we've got an entire mile of colonial era houses. I don't think any other city in the country has something like that. So those are the things that stick out in my mind. But also, some of the undiscovered places of Rhode Island, the Northwest and Western Rhode Island with its rural character, small towns and villages. I teach out at Pontiac High School in Foster, Gloucester, and it's just beautiful out here. Autumn, just the foliage is just so nice, and just all year round. So, there's so much of Rhode Island that's just beautiful. Every city has its beautiful areas, every town. I really love this state. The state has been really good to me, and it's an honor to be able to run for office here in Rhode Island. And I hope more people get to travel out into the Northwest areas and West areas of Rhode Island. And it's the beauty, our state is small, so you can see so much of it. You just have to take a different turn and go in a different direction.
It's very true. There's something for everybody, and it's all very close. No more than 30 minutes away to get from one side to the other. I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Ross, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure of mine to have you on.
I really appreciate you having me on the show. And for all your viewers, I ask them, research the candidates, listen to what they have to say, and vote with your head, vote with your heart. Look for the person that you want to lead here in Rhode Island. And just thank you for taking part in the American process. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Growing out in college.
Yep, definitely. Go Anchors. Absolutely. And anytime. You're always welcome back on in the future, too. And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.